On the 11th of August 1999, there was a total solar eclipse that was to occur, visible primarily from Europe, but especially the Middle East, where it would be high in the sky under perhaps the most optimal viewing conditions. A friend of mine, Dennis Cicco, had plans to observe the total solar eclipse in Turkey, but he had to change his plans at the last minute and then realized that, hey, you can actually see this eclipse at the beginning, at the onset, when the moon's shadow first strikes the Earth, and it happens relatively close to home, about 400 nautical miles off the coast of New England. And he was trying to put together, get together a team to hire a plane, fly out over the ocean, and view the eclipse. But he was having trouble getting all the elements together. And I'm a pilot, and I have my own airplane. I thought, wonder if we could do something with this. And I realized, of course, no. I mean, it's a recreational vehicle. It's not designed for long over-water flights, and it can barely handle 2 people and fuel and a bit of luggage. But I have a friend of mine, Mitch Sayare. I introduced Dennis to Mitch.
I was approached by Dennis to inquire as to whether or not you could use my house in Nantucket to look at potentially at least a partial solar eclipse. And when we talked about it further, I learned that in fact the eclipse would begin a mere 300 or 400 miles east of Nantucket in the Atlantic. I own an airplane, so why not get up in the air, be above the clouds, or potential clouds, and go intercept the beginning of the course of the solar eclipse so that we can have totality and, full eclipse. The 3 of us decided to go follow the line of totality as far as we could. My understanding is correct. The shadow moves at about 1,300 miles an hour, and we move in my airplane at about 380 miles an hour. So we weren't going to be in the shadow for a long time. We weren't going to be effectively chasing it across the globe, but we could chase it for some time and enjoy, a minute or 2 of totality.
In order to view a solar eclipse, you've got to be in the right location at the right time. And especially trying to view it from an aircraft, you can't just fly out over the ocean towards the sun and expect to see it. You may miss the very narrow path of totality that you have to be on in order to view the eclipse. Fred Espenek is a noted eclipse expert, and he calculated the waypoints, the positions, the path that Mitch had to fly over the ocean in order to encounter the moon's shadow at just the right time so that we could see this eclipse.
It was an ideal situation for an eclipse flight where you were in the cockpit looking out at the eclipse, because the way the path was traveling and the flight of the plane to take a good look at the eclipse was exactly the same. So all we had to do was get to the beginning of the eclipse, fly down the track, wait for it to happen, and actually by flying at 300 knots or whatever, we extended totality by some number of seconds from what it would have been if we had been just on the ocean at that point watching it.
I had never seen an eclipse before. This was my first eclipse, and having the privilege of being able to see it from an airplane and having these 2 passions for aviation and astronomy converge was really wonderful.
I thought one of the most amazing things about the eclipse, Dennis, and I don't know if you felt this way either. I'd never seen one before, so to me, everything was new. But I had an appreciation for what people on the ground don't see about an eclipse unless you're at a high point of elevation. So what we had in front of us as we were flying toward the sun was the entire shadow of the moon. And there was a cloud deck below. And so the shadow was very clear on the cloud. If you look down, you see the shadow. But if you look 50 or 60 miles on either side of the plane outward, it was bright again, bright daylight. So it was really impressive. A very clear demarcation between the shadow and the bright area.
I mean, I'll second that as well, because I was caught up, having seen eclipses before. Most of the time with the sun high in the sky, you're fixated on the sun and watching that last little shrinking crescent and the diamond ring and the look for the corona and prominences. But from our perspective, we had that in front of us to look at, but we also had, as Mitch said, the cloud deck down below, which was just fantastic, because within a matter of a minute, you could see it going from sunlight into deep sunset colors. There was a lot of just wonderful orange and very sharp shadows cast on the clouds, and then suddenly you were aware of this cone of shadow that was really sweeping over us from behind, but very distinct in the sky. Certainly with a low eclipse, you get a number of other effects. I remember one afterwards being that in looking at the sun with the naked eye, it had the moon illusion. The moon looks much larger when it's near the horizon, so for us looking at the eclipse, it seemed much larger. In fact, I got the feeling I was almost looking at it with binoculars. It seemed that large to the eye. Plus, we had prominences all around the sun. A short eclipse gives you a brief bit of totality, but the option to see a lot of events going around the moon's limb all at once, where in a much longer eclipse you would see those at the very beginning of totality on one edge of the moon and at the end of totality on the other edge of the moon. So we had a lot of cool stuff to really look at.
You know, I just remember, just ingrained in my memory is the expression you had as you turned to me when you said, "You smell that?" It's the middle of the ocean. I mean, it may as well be the middle of the ocean. 25,000 feet and it's dark. And the last thing you want someone to say is,
"What's that smell? What is that smell?" You're absolutely right. I remember that vividly. And I was worried. You know, as a pilot, you're always looking for symptoms of problems. And the nose is a pretty good detector of some problems, fuel leaks and the like. And I was concerned that somehow into the cockpit we were getting an odor that smelled like refined petroleum. Wasn't quite sure what it was. It didn't smell like jet fuel. It might have smelled like partially burnt jet fuel, which was very worrisome. In the end, however, what we discovered was that the compass, which is a magnetic compass above the glare shield behind the windshield on this aircraft, is comprised of a magnet that floats in kerosene. And apparently one of the seals let loose in the compass housing such that kerosene began slowly leaking out of the compass onto the glare shield, and we eventually picked up the odor. Now, I didn't have a rag. Now, since that experience, of course, I always carry a rag in my airplane. Is that not correct? I mean, I didn't have a rag. We looked for a rag, there was no rags, and Peter was kind enough to donate to the cause a pair of unused socks that was folded in a ball. And we put that under the compass to absorb the spent kerosene, and the rest of the flight was uneventful. Well, I guess that's not true. I mean, the big event was the eclipse, but fortunately we were able to see it despite the fragrance of kerosene in the cockpit.
lots of eclipse images, lots of coverage of past eclipses, so I know what an eclipse looks like. But seeing it for the first time live was special, and having viewed it from this marvelous aircraft seemed to resemble something out of a science fiction movie. It was really quite phenomenal.